start? Hello, I'm Mark Unkefer, and welcome to the Montgomery County Republican Club's Direct Line Show, our effort to keep in touch with people during this COVID crisis. And I'm very pleased to have two guests because we needed two people to find out what the hell's going on with this election. We've got Jim Shalik coming on. He's the president of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, and undoubtedly, he's the receiving end of a whole lot of questions and emails about what's happening with the election. But I'm also very pleased to have a colleague of mine, the first vice chair of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee, and former councilman from Friendship Heights, Dennis Melby. So welcome, Dennis. We're really pleased to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So what we're going to put you through, we had you on 2 weeks ago. Was it 2 weeks ago, Jim? And now the ballots are going out, and I know there are a whole lot of questions. What can you just quickly give us a rundown as to kind of what the process is? This is an election that's unlike any that Montgomery County or Maryland has had in the past, in that it's not exactly an all-mail ballot, but it is primarily a mail-in ballot. So, Jim, can you just give us an overview? Yes.
Sure, Mark. As you know, the governor issued a proclamation because of the coronavirus that this election, the primary, would be delayed from April 28th to June 2nd. And he's directed through his proclamation that it be an all mail-in vote. However, we will have, based on his direction and the State Board of Elections, 4 vote centers. We used to have about almost 250 polling places, but we're going to have 4 on June 2nd for people that did not get a ballot or need help voting. And they are in Silver Spring, Burtonsville, Gaithersburg, and Germantown. The ballots went out statewide, not from our board, but under the direction of the State Board of Elections. And they used a vendor, and the name of that vendor was Sea Change, or is Sea Change, and I believe they're out of Minnesota. And they've been tasked with mailing out the millions and millions of ballots statewide. Unfortunately, there's been, as expected, some snafus. Baltimore City and Montgomery County apparently were the last 2 big jurisdictions that the ballots went out. So recently, a number of people have reached out for us that they haven't gotten their ballot, but they should have gotten it by now, or at the very least by this Saturday. If someone does not get a ballot, we're instructing them to get on our website, the Montgomery County Board of Elections, or call 240-777-8550 or 240-777-8500 and tell us you didn't get a ballot, and we're going to send out a second ballot. But when we send out the second ballot, the first ballot that you got, if it came and you voted and sent it in, that's going to be disqualified. So if someone calls us for a ballot and then gets the first ballot, votes it and mails it in, when we get the first ballot, we're going to disqualify it. So it's a little tricky, and if you ask for a second ballot and you get it, but before you got it, you voted, don't think we know that. So, keep an eye on the mailbox. We're hoping everybody's going to get a ballot within the next couple of days in Montgomery County. Put it in the mailbox or the mail drops. We're going to have 7 mail drops around the county for people that don't want to use the mail. And those mail drops are at our Board of Elections in Gaithersburg, at the 4 vote centers, Rockville, at Rockville City Hall, and in Wheaton. But we're encouraging people, get the ballot, vote it as soon as you can, and mail it back. And hopefully that's going to go smooth once we get all the ballots in. A little complicated, but because of the coronavirus, the governor decided that mail-in is the safest way to do it.
Now, for somebody who's not sure if they're going to get a ballot, there's a process where they can check online, right? To basically see
Correct,
if they're duly registered.
correct. That's absolutely correct. But we're encouraged that everybody's going to get their ballot within the next couple of days. And people have reached out for us because sometimes in one family, there may be 4 voters and 2 or 3 got a ballot, but 1 or 2 did not. That's being ironed out. Everybody should have a ballot soon. But if not, you can vote in person if you're not uncomfortable about that on June 2nd, or ask for a duplicate ballot, a second ballot. We want to make sure everybody who wants to vote gets a ballot, and we're making every effort to do that. But, you know, when they mail, I think they're mailing out close to 4 million ballots from Minnesota to hit locally and then distributed. Obviously, there's going to be some mistakes, and there have been, but we're doing everything to make sure you want to vote, you get a ballot, and you can vote. But
Dennis?
bear with us.
Jim, I've been a lot of things. I was a letter carrier and I was a realtor. And I remember when I was a realtor, we had 1 million real estate agents. And once a month, we would send a realtor magazine. I can't imagine sending 4 million things out. When we sent out the magazines, that was a lot of things. We're getting a lot of comments and complaints about whether or not they're actually going to get their ballots. And many of the people in the Republican Party think that the Democrats have gotten their ballots before the Republicans. Do you think that's a possibility because the Democratic, there's so many more and they sent those out first?
From what I'm told, we had nothing to do with it, the local board. It's all under the state board. But we've been told it was not sent out by party. You know, we're relying on a vendor that was retained by the state. We don't know the process, but information I have is that Republicans did get ballots at the same time as Democrats, but with almost 4 million ballots sent out, there's got to be some irregularities, but we're doing everything we can to correct that. But we don't believe it was sent out Democrat first and then Republican. We don't believe that's the case. And don't forget, it's almost 4-1 Democrats, so there's going to be four times as many Democratic ballots being received. So that may contribute to some confusion too.
One of the other issues
I wish you were helping.
Is that with the ballot, you know, they have personal information on the envelope when you send it back. They've got your name and your signature, which upsets some people, and also that they've got your party affiliation on the envelope. Is there any concern about that, and whether people will do something between mailing it and getting it to your office?
No, we don't believe so. I mean, we have an authentication on the envelope that under oath, and it's a felony if there's some misbehavior or wrongdoing, that we need an affirmation that under oath, this is you and this is your ballot and you're eligible to vote. And if we find some misbehavior or criminal conduct, they can be prosecuted. But we needed that affirmation to go after someone if there's fraud.
Now, last
And
time we
we're
were,
going to have. I'm sorry, Mark.
I was just going to say the last time we talked on this, we talked about the issue of absentee ballot harvesting, and that is the phenomena that is legal in some states like California, where campaigns and parties go out and basically go door to door and collect absentee ballots, take possession of them and send them in, which is an opportunity for fraud. And I will say that when I got, and we kind of went into what the law is on that, and I was very pleased when I got my ballot. There is specifically a document that says basically people can't be hired to do it. You can have somebody help you with it, with your mail ballot, your absentee ballot, but that any kind of organized effort, like a campaign being gathered, a union, an employer situation, something like that, that's crime. And I will say that I was kind of gratified to see that we do have those laws on the book. It did make me feel a lot better about the process.
And if someone assists someone with filling out the ballot, there's a form that has to be sent back with the ballot from the person that assisted the voter. And it can't be a member, a person of a union that you're a member, or your employer or a candidate. to assist you with filling out the ballot. But there's a separate form that has to be filled out if someone assists you with the voting.
That's a good thing. It's a real concern about both mail-in and absentee ballots in other jurisdictions. So I'm glad we still have that on the books. Now, could you expand a little bit about the scenarios in which you mentioned the 4 locations on election day. How does that work?
Well, there's no early voting, but the governor and the state board felt that there has to be some in-person availability for people that don't get ballots or need help or need some assistance to vote. So the state board allowed Montgomery County to have 4 voting centers, and we tried to disperse it geographically to the most populous areas: Silver Spring, Burtonsville, Gaithersburg, Germantown. And someone can vote in any one of those, and we will have your ballot style there. But we're down from almost 250 polling places to 4. But we are encouraging people very strongly to vote by mail. You know, we're going to have judges there, and, you know, the virus is the overriding cloud over this election, and we certainly don't want anybody to be exposed. So we're urging people, vote by mail. That's a strong message. But they can vote on June 2nd at one of those 4 polling places.
So one of the questions we have from one of the viewers is about the prospect of doing in-person vote in November. Now, I'm sure we've all seen some of the back and forth in the press, but what are you hearing behind the scenes about that?
I know, it's up to the governor. You know, his proclamation overrides the election law in terms of the procedure for an election. And from what I'm told is he's going to make that decision tentatively in June because of the preparation needed. Certainly the general election in November is going to be a higher turnout, I think, than the primary, hundreds of thousands of voters. So we're hoping that if he does make a decision, it's in June to give us time to prepare. Because then we have to stock and get ready for, 250 or so polling places and getting judges. And that's been a big concern for us, Mark, is getting enough judges to man the polls. You know, we're going to have face masks and gloves and sanitizer and the whole cadre of protection for these people. But a lot of judges didn't want to work. They're scared of the virus, and that's understandable. That's the main concern, is a safe election. That the worst thing that could happen is somebody get infected with the virus because they wanted to vote. That would be terrible. So we're making every effort to make everybody safe. And it's controllable with 4 sites. 250 sites, that's a whole different ballgame. But it's up to the governor, and whatever he decides to do, we implement. But there's a lot of discussion about that. Health experts, it's a big decision in all the states. And no matter what decision you make, half the people won't be happy. You know, there's a lot of pushback about mail-in voting, and there's a lot of pushback about the risks of in-person voting. So it's up to the governor. Up to the governor.
Dennis?
Yeah, I'm coming at this obviously as a partisan with the Republican Party, but I think the Republicans are really concerned that there might be chances for fraud. I think that the Democrats by and far, like mail-in voting, and I actually think young people like mail-in voting because they're much more used to working with computers and doing mail-in things and not having to show up places. What do you think the future is going to be? Do you think it's going to be more mail-in voting, or do you think we'll go back to the way it was before?
Well, there's certainly a movement afoot among the legislators to move towards more access to voting, which would include mail-in voting. Before this pandemic, almost a third of our vote in the last election was early voting and absentee voting. So it's a trend, it's a wave that's coming. More and more accessibility, longer early voting periods, more no reason mail-in voting. You don't have to have a reason. So it's coming. You know, the dialogue is towards expanding access, which includes mail-in voting. Now, in terms of, you know, subject to fraud, yes, that's always possible. I wouldn't think in a primary, though, where there's no Republican Democrat election against each other, that the risk of fraud is not as great as in a general election. But in a primary, each party is voting within their own candidacies. But it's a risk. There's no question about it, you know. But the virus is overshadowing everything we're doing.
Yes.
You know, this is a killer. I mean, you know, people are dying from this virus. You know.
One of the concerns we've heard.
That's an issue.
Yeah, one of the concerns we've heard from other people are the ballots that are going out to inactive voters. Now, I thought when we last talked about it, the standard was that if somebody had missed 3 federal elections, they were off the rolls.
Well, here's the thing. It's a little complicated, but I'll try and simplify it. You cannot be taken off the rolls because you don't vote. If John Doe lives at the same address in Silver Spring for 50 years, but hasn't voted, he's not subject to being removed just because of that. You get to be inactive when we send out notices, sample ballots, and it comes back to us that you're not at that address. When that happens, if you then don't vote in the next 2 elections, you can be removed, you know, from the rolls. But what triggers you becoming inactive is we get mail back, primarily the sample ballot. That comes back that you're not there, you know, addressee unknown. Then, if you miss the 2 next elections, you're considered inactive. Now, we're getting calls from people that say, I haven't voted in 3 or 4 elections, but I've lived here all my life, or 20 years, and they get a ballot. Yes, they get a ballot because to us, you're still at the same address, but you decided not to vote in a couple of cycles. So that's the most current thing. That also, if someone gets a ballot, but they think that they were inactive, we may still send them a ballot because we get notifications from the MVA when someone changes their address. And if we get notification from a government agency or the MVA that you have in fact changed your address, then you'll get a ballot. You're okay with us then. We just need an official transfer of address to send you a ballot. It's a little complicated, but
but I will tell you a personal scenario with a member of my household. So the last time they voted in Maryland was 2012. So they've missed 2014, 2016, 2018, and our household has moved since 2014. Actually, that person voted. My son voted from a different address in 2012. The scenario where you describe mail is returned, since ours is still an active household, mail routinely gets delivered because it's got the right same last name.
Right.
I have to assume that that's not. I mean, I've heard that the scenario, this seems to happen a lot with children. I think I'm looking at a question I have from somebody who's, I know their children have been getting ballots at their household for quite some time. It seems from what you're saying, and again, I understand the law is the law, that as long as mail gets delivered to an address for a household member, even though they haven't voted for however many elections, it could go on forever, they will still continue getting those ballots. Now,
I'm sorry.
In a face-to-face situation, that vote's not going to be voted, but in a mail-in scenario like that, I'm not voting my son. Let me be clear, but in the mail-in election, the opportunity for fraud is significantly greater because you've got these ballots going to essentially inactive voters that are have left the state, even half a decade, close to a decade ago. I mean, that's, as I understand it, that's really what you're saying, right?
Well, what I'm saying is we're not triggered. We're not triggered to look at someone as an inactive voter and possibly take them off the rolls if you get our mail. In other words, if we don't get mail back when we send you a voter guide or a sample ballot or other information, if
Right.
we don't get it back, we're assuming that you're there and you just haven't voted, and that's your right not to vote. And also, has your son changed his address with motor vehicles or any other government agency?
He's been
That
registered.
because we get those change of addresses,
Sure.
so that would make it okay too.
Yeah, but he's been a registered driver in Colorado for about 8 years, and registered voter in
Well,
Colorado
it
for 8
seems like
years.
the board never got back official election mail, which
Right.
would trigger to us that he's not there. Apparently, if it goes through and he gets it, that's not a concern of ours.
Okay, let me go on. I guess one of the issues that we have from one of our listeners is about any procedures to stop undocumented aliens from voting. So you might want to elaborate on that process. I know you and I, Jim, have had a lot of discussions over the years of precisely this point.
Well, under oath, you have to attest that you're a citizen, to vote. Maryland does not require ID, and that's the law. I mean, the law is we have to follow the law that when you register at motor vehicles or you register to vote, you certify under oath that you're an American citizen, and that certification allows you to proceed. It's a legislative issue. It's the law. A lot of people have a lot of criticism of some of the election laws, but they have to deal with the legislature. And the legislature, I've been up there many times testifying, the philosophy of the legislature and the coming of that in the years to come is expanding access, making it easier to vote. And that's the wave of the future. And a lot of people are, I'm an old-fashioned guy too, and this is all new to me. A lot of people they want election day, period. But the legislature in this state and other states is going in a different direction. Early voting, mail voting, internet. You can print the ballot off the internet, and that's the philosophy of the legislation in Maryland. I see it expanding too. More early voting, more mail-ins. So that's the future. If people are not happy with it, they have to take it up with their legislators.
Dennis.
And what should people do if they get ballots at their house that are not for people that live there? If they get the previous tenants' ballots, or if they get kids that have moved away, or if they get parents that have passed on, what should they do with those ballots?
They should mail it back to the Board of Elections. The address is on there, and put on it, addressee doesn't live here or addressee unknown. Send it back with clear language that this person does not live at that house, and mail it back to us. Big letters.
And that'll do it. That'll take care of it.
That's how we know. Yeah, get it
Good.
back to us as soon as you can, and make it very clear that this person does not live there. And we have people assigned to get that mail and get those people off the rolls, or at least initiate an investigation. But that's what they should do. Get it back to us. Just don't throw it out. We have to know.
Good. That's good to hear.
We have 700,000 eligible. I think right now we have about 730,000 eligible voters, and we're bigger than a number of states. Someone told me we're bigger than 5 states, and it's a huge operation. And we have to the public has to participate with us. A lot of people they get something in the mail for someone who doesn't live there, and they throw it out. That doesn't help us. So good question. Let us know.
Do you have one of the laws that the boards of elections around the country have to comply with are the procedures for letting servicemen vote? And I know that takes a little extra time in order to comply, in order to get the ballot to them. Can you expand on that? And can you tell us about will this election be able to comply with those rules?
Well, generally, without this situation, without the pandemic, the law is, and I'm not 100% sure on the time period. I thought I don't want to. I think it was 45 days before an election, but I'm not 100% sure about that. The law requires that they get sent a ballot within a very substantial period before the election. So that there's laws in this state and other states that within a certain date prior to the election, they have to be sent their ballots. And we comply with that. Now, this election, our ballots went out. We thought they were going to go out May 1st. We understand that they went out around May 9th for a June 2nd election. So, this election, with the governor's proclamation, it overrides a lot of these rules, to comply with what the governor ordered. But all the overseas military ballots were sent as fast as we could. And that's a priority for our board.
So it sounds as
And they have
if
to
it
be,
was if it was
they have to, in
45
other words, we have
days,
to have a ballot.
right?
I'm not, it may have changed, Mark. It may have changed, but the ballots to vote on June 2nd, we have to have them postmarked by June 2nd. And at the drop boxes, we will have staff at all the 7 drop boxes at 8 o'clock on June 2nd, picking up the ballots that are in the drop boxes. So that's the deadline, June 2nd at 8 o'clock. Postmarks and ballots in the drop boxes. That's why there was a special meeting today at the State Board of Elections, and a lot of concern because a lot of people in Baltimore City haven't gotten them, and we still have a fairly significant amount in Montgomery County, but we've been assured that everybody's going to get their ballots by this weekend. But it's close. I mean, they have to be postmarked by June 2nd. There is an effort to extend that, but to this point, it's not successful. But June 2nd, 8 o'clock is the deadline. People have to jump on it when they get it. But if they don't have it by the weekend, call. We'll get you a second ballot.
It's funny, we just got a question asked about whether or not they'll extend the polling date. And it sounds like probably not, but there actually may be some discussion about that, is what I'm hearing.
There is discussion, but as we talk, to my knowledge, no. Okay. It's still June 2nd, 8 o'clock. But there is discussion about that. Baltimore City's having, from what I understand, a substantial problem. Tens of, I don't want to exaggerate, but there's a significant number of voters that haven't gotten their ballots in Baltimore City. So I know that the state board was considering directing them to have more vote centers to accommodate people that haven't gotten their ballot. But the state board is deciding that either today or in the very near future.
Right. They were also asking for Montgomery County to have 2 more sites, weren't they?
It's on the table. It's on the table. Some legislators were promoting that, but it's up to the state board. What they're concerned about is there'll be more people voting in person because they haven't gotten their ballot. But again, I'm very concerned about people's health. And you saw, I think it was Wisconsin, they had a very few number of voting centers, but the lines was a big crush. And, we don't want that. We want everybody to vote by mail, because we have election workers and, somebody sneezes waiting in line to vote, the risk of infection is significant. That's the overriding concern here.
Now, will there be any...
Turned everything on its head, Dennis.
Sure. Will there be any opportunity to challenge the results or the process? Maybe you can elaborate on the kind of review that goes on.
Yes. The canvass, our Board of Elections and its staff, we're directed by law to canvass the votes. And we have bipartisan teams, bipartisan canvassers that when a ballot is opened, usually it's clear as a bell who the person voted for, and then it's scanned and registered as a vote. if a ballot comes in where the voter's intent is not clear, who they voted for, or there's markings on the ballot, we see all kinds of crazy things on ballots. People will vote for somebody, cross it out, and then vote for someone else, or they'll circle it, or they write us a note. If it's not clear who the person voted for, then our board, through iPad communication, they've set us up electronically to examine those ballots in dispute. Then our board would decide the vote is for X or the vote is for Y. That will be available through our website for the public to see, and they can challenge a decision of the board as to who the voter intended to vote for. Everything is going to be available to see on, through video of the canvas. So yes, the bottom line is yes, people can challenge a decision of the board as to who that vote went for.
So the
Yes.
process is where you used to have two people together. Now it's going to be available online. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, the canvas, the canvases will be in at the Board of Elections.
Right.
And they will be on live stream as long as they're canvassing. Our board will participate they gave us iPads by electronic communication to examine ballots that the staff, the canvassers, can't determine who the ballot was intended to vote for. And the public will see that. And if someone says, no, that vote should have been for X, and the board said it was for Y, that can be challenged. That can be challenged. I mean,
Now,
generally the ballots are pretty clear, pretty simple.
I have a question, and I must say I'm not I don't know the full context, but it's a question about Congressional District 7, the special election, and I gather there's some concerns about a voter fraud, being Baltimore City, and given the history of problems with elections there, I guess that's not a surprise. Are you familiar with any special effort? I know you referenced the State Board of Elections meeting that had taken place. Are you familiar with any additional oversight that's going on there? I realize it's out of your jurisdiction. I appreciate that.
Well, I know that they, no, but I know that they're going to look at best practices and review all the complaints in Baltimore City. They will be doing that. Yes. Fraud is always a concern of everybody. But if you do it, it's a felony. I mean, we're doing the best we can. I mean, if someone wants to commit a felony, then it's on them. But no, there is oversight and review for best practices, what went wrong, and allegations of fraud. Yes, there will be a follow-up investigation.
I know from my personal
every county
experience that you don't run the municipal elections in the towns and the villages and things. And I've also seen that most of the local elections are going to mail-in ballots this time also for the same reason, because of the coronavirus. I think Rockville just did their whole election with the mail-in ballots, and their response rate really increased. Do you think there's going to be a huge increase in the number of people that are voting?
Rockville did get an increase, Dennis. You're correct. We hope, we encourage as a board more people to vote. We hope so. It's certainly easy. It's a short ballot, especially on the Republican side. It's a short ballot. You get it, you fill it out and mail it in. I mean, there's nothing simpler than that. We want to encourage people, though, and remind them that on the back of the envelope, they have to sign their name, date, and print their name. Otherwise, won't be counted, because that's the attestation. That's the under oath affirmation that it's you, and the warning of the penalties. So we just don't put it in the envelope and mail it. Make sure you, on the back side of the envelope, you sign it, date it, and print your name. Very important. But we're encouraging. We're hoping we get a big turnout.
Stamp and bring it in.
Good.
One of the interesting things too is, of course, on what Dennis just showed. I've got the same in front of me as well. There's a stop. If ID required is stamped on this envelope, you must submit ID with your ballot, or your ballot won't be counted. Now, can you kind of elaborate on what scenarios are a ID required ballot?
To me, that would be an address issue, that the board, there's some question about your address. I think that was the primary concern for ID, to firm up an address that may be an issue with the board, maybe a change of address or something not clear. I think that's the main concern, to substantiate your address. But some of the items, one of the items that you can send in is like utility bill, I believe. So the main concern on that is the address with the voter. That's a main concern. And if it's stamped ID required, you got to put that in there with the ballot.
Now, does that
the address
include,
issue is the main address with that.
sure, does that include first-time voters, or would it be a narrower group of people than that?
If there's a concern from our staff that the address, it's not a solid
Okay.
issue, I think that's the main reason.
Well, I think that really covered it. Dennis, you got more questions?
Now, I was wondering how this compares with a regular year. How many mail-in ballots do you usually get in a regular year?
It's growing. I don't have the exact amount, but maybe 10%, 15%. But now we're hoping to get 95% by mail. Our goal is 100% by mail. This way, nobody's at risk. We even were so concerned that we told people in the instructions, don't lick your envelope. Use a cloth, something wet, or tape it. Don't lick the envelope. And also under our procedures, when we get a ballot in, we have to let it sit for 24 hours. So we don't even touch it for 24 hours. Again, because of the virus issues. So safety has been our main issue here. Hopefully everybody's safe, healthy, and votes by mail. That's the goal.
Sounds good. Dennis, if you don't have any more questions, I guess we can stop that there and let Jim go back to, now, when do you start counting them all? You're counting them as we come in. They're coming in right now, right?
Oh,
not you personally,
yes,
but the board.
Good question. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I will be swearing in the canvassers, and our canvass begins tomorrow. We can open the ballots and start processing them tomorrow, and for as long as it takes. We got permission from the state board to do that, because if we had to wait like in the past until election day, our canvass could take months. So we're allowed to start canvassing tomorrow, opening ballots, processing them, reviewing them by the board if there's a review needed, so that we have a head start before June 2nd. So good question. We start tomorrow.
I assume the expectation is that most of them will be machine read, and then if you have issues, then you put them to the side?
Correct. Yeah, hopefully they go through without any controversy or issues about voter intent.
Right.
But they'll be screened. If you don't sign the back of the ballot, not going to be counted. There's a lot of things that they will preliminarily do before they're scanned and harvested the votes, and then we announce them starting at after the polls close on June 2nd.
But I think from our last
the
call,
process starts tomorrow.
We said that, and just maybe reiterate that there's a manual check on the signature to make sure that it corresponds with the registration. Now, is that done visually, or is that done with computer?
I know the staff is working on that verification signature. We'll have that sorted out tomorrow. Exactly. That's another issue. Sometimes people sign their name differently, almost every time or on occasion. So that's an issue. Middle names, initials, signature. Margaret Jurgensen, our election director, who's one of the best in the country, She's been training the staff to examine the signatures. And if there's a question, again, about the sufficiency of a signature, that'll be for the board to decide. We'll look at the registered signature on file, the ballot signature. That'll be a question for the board to decide. That's one of those issues where the board gets involved in the canvass.
So somebody who
look that closely.
registered 40 years ago could, I mean, obviously their signature could have changed quite a bit over the years, and that would be potentially an issue for you guys to resolve, right?
I mean, there's always potential issues with a signature, but generally, most of the time it's clear that that's the person, from my experience. It's from my experience.
Okay.
And, in my experience, yes, there's fraud. There's always fraud in any human endeavor. But in my experience, it has not been a big issue in the past in terms of fraud, people voting and they're not that person. It certainly will happen. It may happen, could happen. But I've been encouraged in my experience, my 5 years on the board, that Montgomery County runs clean elections.
But you do
I've seen that.
You do make referrals to the state prosecutor from time to time when people do step over the line. I mean, it is not a crime that does not go unrecognized. What the prosecutor does then may be another issue, but you guys do make referrals when you see things.
We do. People voting, people voting at early voting, and then sending in an absentee ballot. Duplicate votes is something that we've seen in the past. People voting twice. That's a concern. And illegal conduct, we refer to the state prosecutor, who handles prosecution of election law violations. So it does not go unpunished.
We should there are a couple places in the state where we should put big signs up saying, beware the state prosecutor, but we won't leave you with that responsibility, Chip. Anyway, thank you very much. Dennis, unless you've got another question, I just really would like to thank Jim this is the second time we've had you on, but I have to say this is a topic we really appreciate your ability to come back on and help on this, because we did have a lot of questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. It's important you raise these issues. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for being such a good source of information. And Dennis, thank you very much for participating with us. It's been great to be on with you.
It's good being with the both of you.
Thanks.
Great. Now we'll have this available. There's the video for this. If you came in a little bit late, we will have this posted on our YouTube page and actually on the Facebook page as well. So there'll be an opportunity to perhaps watch it from the beginning or listen to something that maybe you didn't catch this that much closer. So thank you very much for both of you. And that concludes Direct Line